Hello and welcome to another Checkpoints review, and today we're checking out Bloober Team, the guys who did Layer of Fear and Observer. Today we're checking out their Blair Witch game, which is available on PC and Xbox One. And this game has actually been a complete hit and miss with a lot of people. I've heard a lot of people say this game is very bad, and I've heard a lot of people say this game is actually pretty decent as a psychological horror game. And for me personally, I'm right there in the middle. I agree with both ends and I can see the problem. So let's go into it. I think I like this game more than I don't dislike this game, and I can understand the problems with people not liking this game. And actually, before I go into the good stuff, I actually want to talk about what isn't great about this game. For one, I'm not a fan of this game's controls, and I think that is an overall theme that I'm seeing with this game, is that the controls themselves feel a little bit janky. For example, to call your dog, you have to press the LB button, and then you have to wait until your dog is close to you, and then you have to hold down the LB button while looking straight at your dog to actually command him to do anything. And this can be very time consuming, and it just doesn't feel fluid or right for a 2019 game. And it's quite confusing as well, because as a lot of people pointed out, the keyboard has plenty of keys and the controller has plenty of buttons that you can do stuff with, and in this game you can't actually do anything with the D-pad. Therefore it makes me wonder why they didn't just use the dog commands as D-pad, which would have made it a lot more fluid, and which would have made the player actually feel like they're talking to their dog rather than talking to a robot that they have to control by looking it dead in the eyes. The game's inventory system here is practically non-existent. It's good to have a choice to be able to look through your bag and look through the inventory and the stuff you've picked up, but half of people I've communicated with about this game don't even know that you can feed the dog. There's actually dog snacks in the bag, which I imagine actually helps the relationship with the dog, which plays an important part to the ending of the game and how the dog will help you in combat. But yeah, this inventory system here isn't very well explained, and it sort of just leaves it up to you to use it or not, and it actually could be very useful, and I kind of feel like they should have mentioned things like this just to sort of make the player a little bit more aware of what they're available to do and what they're available to look into. This game hasn't been optimized very well as well, which is a shame, because this game can look fantastic at certain moments, but it's because of these visuals this game's frame rate just goes completely out of the window, and you'll find yourself playing at a tops of 15 frames a second in certain moments, which is a shame because it completely ruins the immersion that this game builds up so well, and it completely ruins the fear and the tension that this game holds, and reminds you that you're still in the real world and you're not really there in the moment, because this game's optimization, it does hold this game back and make it feel way more dated than it really deserves to be. And don't get me started on the glitches. This game hasn't been patched too well. I actually found myself having to restart from several checkpoints because this fucking dog that you have doesn't want to command or even do anything that you ask, and most often than not you find yourself being frozen in the screen to do the commands. I don't know if anyone else had this issue. I haven't seen anyone else talk about this issue, but for me personally, this came up so many times, for an example that I'm showing right here, that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't command the dog was just stuck, and I was stuck and I wasn't able to move. Therefore I had to restart the whole game from the last checkpoint, and this can be completely time consuming, as I mentioned earlier, and also just once again ruin the flow, the tension and the story that this game is trying to tell, and that is a really big shame. And these reasons and these bad moments come up so often enough that this game actually doesn't feel like it's worth it in the end. It's not a full price game as you can expect, and that is fine, and I say it can be worth picking it up if you're willing to just look past these issues, and that's a shame because this game does hit on a few special moments that actually cost this game what could have been a really great horror franchise, or even just what could have been a great horror game on its own, but it has cost this game a lot, and it really should have been patched out, and it really should have been sorted before release, and for that reason I understand why a lot of people can skip this game. It totally makes sense. But for me, I really still enjoyed this game. I had a fun time sitting all the way through it from start to finish. You can finish this game in about 3 hours, which is totally fine for this game's price, though it has a lot of replayability because there's 4 different endings, though all of them personally aren't great and probably ain't even worth the whole entire effort that you go through. This game feels like it's a little bit more about the journey than actually the outcome, which is a shame, but I do like the replayability, and I do like that they make you want to prioritize on different things when you're playing this game a second or even third time over. But why do I think that this game is probably one of the best movie tie-in games that we've had in a very long time? And that's because this game understands what the Blair Witch was. It understands how it felt, and it understands what the characters were going through, and most importantly it understands its lore, and that's something that you've got to respect about the people who made this game. You've got to understand that they really have a lot of passion for this series, or at least Lionsgate Studios put a gun to their head and told them, hey, you got to focus on this at the moment. But either way, I like that they had a lot of passion here and they had a lot of energy, and a lot of it adds up to the movies, and that feels great. I've heard a lot of people complain that this game feels like it's the same thing over and over again, and it feels a little bit repetitive, and I feel like that is almost intentional here. Of course, it's easy to say, oh yeah, that's just kind of a lazy way to pull it, but in the film and even in a lot of the lore of the Blair Witch has this ability to be able to mess with your mind, be able to control time, and even be able to put things in an endless loop, and that's something that they even talk about in the films, and this actually even plays a major part in the first movie, because you end up getting lost and you end up walking around in circles until you get lost, until you end up going insane, and until things just look worse and worse. It's almost Silent Hill-esque, the fact that you're just stuck in an endless loop and you feel like you're only getting further away and then ending up back to where you began. It's hellish, but it's a really cool idea, and I love the fact that they did this in this game, and it makes you feel like, haven't I been here before? Haven't I seen this campsite before? What about this tree? I've been past this tree 3 times, and they so perfectly pull it all into one big loop that you don't even see it happen in front of you. You don't see the screen tear, you don't see anything. It just sort of happens and goes so smoothly that it is very unexpected when you're like, wait, haven't I already been here before? And it sort of makes you realise, oh shit, okay, I'm stuck in this moment and things are a lot worse than they seem. I've heard a solid complaint that the monsters in this aren't great, and hey, I actually totally agree here. I think the tree monsters, though they're very unnecessarily there and they just sort of get in the way and there for scares and almost not even a threat, I do like how they just sort of blend in with the background and you don't get a good glimpse at what they are, and I feel like this once again resonates with what the Blair Witch did so well, not showing you what you're really fighting. The thing with these monsters, yeah, you get a good look at them if you really sort of angle your camera correctly, but they're just tree monsters and it's not great, but the fact that they can be defeated so easily and they can be moving around so quickly can very easily make you wonder what you're even up against and what even is happening here, and that's something that happens in the Blair Witch and even in the 2016 terrible fucking movie. They show a very small glimpse of what appears to be a monster of some kind, but we're not too sure if this is the Blair Witch or if this is something even much worse. I quite like the idea that this game tries to go for that same energy and doesn't want to show you too much of what you're fighting and almost leaves it all entirely up to your mind. And then you have the other enemies, which are just balls of leaves. What? And this game does a very good job of making you feel like you're there in 1996 by having your phone, which clearly shows its time, and most importantly having Snake, which you're able just to play and you can have a good, you can, yeah. Come on, you son of a bitch. Yeah. Yeah, and just, I need attention. Fuck's sake. And this game dates it quite nicely, and I think I did a good job of that, and aesthetically it feels very, very cool to be able to just have the freedom to pull out your phone and play. Come on. Yeah. But personally, I want to talk about what was possibly my favourite moment in this game, and has to be one of my favourite moments in a tie-in movie game and maybe a horror game standalone on itself. This moment was spectacular. There's a moment where you have to go through the Rustin Parr house, and if you know the Blair Witch lore, this is a house that appears in every single Blair Witch movie, which is the house of a guy who was, well, I say a victim of the Blair Witch, who was possessed and went around killing children, built this house, lived in the forest, and the Blair Witch somehow manipulates time so this house always appears and characters always end up in it. It's the last place they go in each movie, and it almost feels like the Freddy Krueger like house or even the Camp Crystal Lake of this genre, and it is really cool to be able to visit it, and it's a room to room remake from the movie, and I do appreciate that. But anyway, there's this moment where you're inside this house and it goes completely pitch black and you have nothing but your night vision on your camera. This is a mechanic that comes up earlier in the game where you have to use your thermal to guide through some fog which you cannot see even a hand in front of you, and there's enemies walking around in these woods, and it's really cool to be able to only see them through thermals, and it adds a lot of tension, but most importantly it adds what I've been looking for in a found footage like game, and that feels like you're actually watching found footage. If you know anything about cinematography when it comes to horror movies and even just cliches of horror movies that we'll see plenty of times, and it's actually even just more popular these days that it's almost dying out as a fucking trend in horror movies, is the use of negative space. And if you're not too sure what negative space is, it's a way to make characters feel isolated or even open for any attack, and this can add tension or even the feeling of feeling alone. And if you've ever watched a horror movie in the last 5 years, you've seen this technique used millions and millions of times, and it's where you're just left open with you're seeing maybe a cat behind a character's character's back, for example. Let's use Insidious as an example, and you know something's going to pop there. You feel like there's got to be something filling that space, and in horror movies they use these opportunities as jump scares or even just as a little fright in the background. It's effective and it always works, and hence why it's just so popular as a technique to use. And for some reason I've not really seen this used too well in a game, because games are a lot harder to translate cinematography or even camera work into, especially on a first person horror game, and this game did it so beautifully, and I respect it for that, and that's why it does such a good job of catching up the vibe of the Blair Witch and found footage movies. So let me explain. So there's this scene where you're going through the complete pitch black and you have to use nothing but your small screen, and something I find impressive here is that the screen doesn't take up the whole entire screen like it does in, say, Outlast, hence why I feel like Outlast failed to become a found footage style game, because the footage itself takes up the whole screen, therefore it's not really much of a footage, it's just a camera filter that goes over the character just so you can see in the dark. But here it feels like it's a tool, it feels like it's something that your character's eyes are really looking through. It feels like you have to rely on this small screen where there's a lot of darkness still around it, and it's very, very creepy, it's impressive, and it builds a lot of tension, and it leads the imagination to be able to wonder what could actually be lurking in the darkness behind that camera lens. And they take this opportunity to throw in a few good scares, and it's respectable, not even just scares. To be able to use thermal vision inside a building and then the next thing you're looking at is a deer, it's enough to confuse the player, and it really puts you in the moment of confusion because your eyes are doing nothing but looking at this location on the screen, therefore your eyes are being controlled and being told where to look, therefore taking you off guard and making sure that you're only focusing on one area, leaving you completely open for a perfectly timed scare, which is used in the negative space. Don't get me wrong, the scare and outcome is a little bit goofy, but it's perfect, it's a good scare, and it would work very effectively on a lot of people, and it creates the found footage vibe, which I've always wanted to see used in a game so perfectly. Fatal Frame was able to do it because once again the screen didn't take up the whole screen, and you relied only on such a small input and a small camera that you had to really focus on the screen, and being focused and looking at a screen will really cause any scare to come up 10 times worse because your brain is 10 times more active and 10 times more locked into what you're doing. So good job on this moment, and personally it was such a fantastic moment, and this whole moment was really, really cool. I feel like this final act dragged out just a little bit too long, which is a shame, but I feel like this alone made this game stand out, and it really is worth experiencing and giving it a go. To add on top of this scene and this act in this whole game, not only are you navigating through the dark using thermal cameras, but you're also avoiding enemies that you're not able to look at and only can see through the thermal cameras, which almost gave me Wreck vibes. And if you've ever seen Wreck, there's this moment where they're stuck inside a pitch black room, only using the camera trying to navigate this random room while this weird, gross, creepy monster is walking around. And this scene is fantastic, and it adds a lot of tension, and it's something that they replicated here perfectly, and once again adds complement to that found footage theme, and I would like to see this done a lot more in games. Hey, even VR could be open for this. Imagine a VR game where you actually have to use the camera to look through it and actually only have pitch blackness, only when you're looking through the camera you're able to navigate. That would be interesting to see, and this game did this so well. I'm sorry I'm raving on about it, but I just really appreciated what they did here, and it created the movie vibes, and it really gave you great Blair Witch moments, and it gave you really, really cool found footage moments. So yeah, good job on that one, guys. It's just a shame about the rest of the game. The tension in this game is fantastic. I really enjoyed the story that they were telling here. I feel like the main character he's fine. He's flawed, he's a bit of a dickhead, and that's cool. I like that you can feel him getting more aggressive, and you can feel him growing as a character or even degrading as a character. He's been through a lot of stuff, and I like that they focus on the PTSD horror, which is actually a very real thing in this world that people who come back from war actually suffer with, and the fact that they can be able to blend that in with a paranormal ghost story or even a witch story is fantastic. So yeah, good job here. I know I haven't really talked about the rewind mechanic with the camera, but in this game, the way you solve puzzles is you have these certain moments where you have to watch footage through the camera, and you're able to manipulate time by rewinding it backwards and forwards and controlling what actually is there in the physical world, which completely makes sense to the Blair Witch being able to manipulate time, which I imagine the camera in this game must be some sort of magic spell or even a cursed item that belongs to her. I'm not too sure about the lore here, but that's a really cool idea, and it doesn't seem at all out of place in the Blair Witch world. But it's just a shame that the rest of the game truly doesn't really hold up to make this moment worth it. I really hope that Bloober team here uses what they've learnt here and understand the errors that they've made, and hopefully it goes into their next Layers of Fear or whatever maybe be their next project, because these guys really do make a lot of good horror games, and most of their games have been a really good hit, but this one has just been a little bit meh, and it could have been a lot better. But hey, I enjoyed it and I got what I wanted to get out of it, and I do appreciate that. Plus I can play. Come on. That's it. It's just Yes. Yep. Yes. Come on. Yep. Yeah, I mean, again, Blair Witch is it's pretty. It's cool. It's pretty decent.